All right, so if you've just finished the new Song of the Welkin Moon quest, you're probably in the same boat as the rest of us, just completely overwhelmed, right? We got hit with this absolute tidal wave of lore. It took these ideas we thought we knew, the three Moon Sisters, and just flipped them on their head. It's so much darker and more complicated than we ever imagined. Look, the goal today isn't to solve everything. I mean, let's be real. The game is nowhere near done telling this story. What we are going to do is try to bring a little bit of order to the chaos. We're going to lay out all the big pieces of Moon lore, but we're going to do it chronologically. That way we can build a solid framework and actually see where this huge new update slots into the bigger picture of Tivat's history.
So yeah, we'll start with those old fairy tales, the stuff we've known for ages, and then we'll follow the trail, all the way from their creation, how they got turned into weapons, to their destruction, and now this kind of shocking modern-day legacy. It's a lot to unpack, so let's just get right into it. For the longest time, the whole idea of Tivat having multiple moons, it was basically just a fairy tale, right? It's the kind of thing you'd find tucked away in those in-game books like Moonlit Bamboo Forest. They were cool stories for sure, but you never really thought of them as, a history lesson. And those stories were always super poetic and tragic. They talked about three sisters ruling the night sky, how they all loved this mysterious morning star, and then some huge catastrophe happened that made them turn on each other, leading to their deaths. It was all very allegorical. It felt like a myth, not something that actually happened. Well, that all just changed. Okay, so this is where everything flips. That old lore just got a massive, massive upgrade to historical fact. The new quest straight up confirms it. Those legends, they weren't just legends. They were echoes of our forgotten history. So Aria, Sonnet, and Canon, they're not just names in a storybook anymore. They were real, actual divine beings, and each one of them was tied to one of Tivat's three moons. And that one confirmation, it completely changes how we have to view the entire cosmos of this world. So let's break that down. This is basically the original setup for Tivat. You had three moon goddesses, each with their own moon. Aria had the eternal moon, Sonnet had the iridescent moon, and Canon had the frost moon. This was the baseline, the way the night sky was supposed to be. But, and this is a huge but, we now know they weren't what they seemed at all. And this is where we get to probably the biggest, most world-shattering piece of lore from this entire update. The story of the moons. It turns out, it's not about astronomy or natural cycles. It's a story about creation, betrayal, and all-out war. Think about this for a second, because the implication here is absolutely insane. For years, the story was that the primordial one created everything. But this says no. It was the dragon sovereigns, their king, Nibelung, who built the entire lunar system from scratch. The moons weren't natural. They were artificial constructs, basically giant machines designed to govern the planet's cycles.
And here's where it gets tragic. When Nibelung went to war against the heavenly principles, his war of vengeance, he didn't just use his own power, he turned on his own creations. He apparently imprisoned the three moon goddesses and converted the very moons they ruled into weapons. We're talking weapons of mass destruction.
So this is the key takeaway, right? The moons weren't just innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of a war. No, they became the weapons. They were active existential threats pointed right at Celestia. It was a deliberate act of weaponization, and that's what forced the heavenly principles to respond, and they responded with overwhelming force. And Celestia's response was, well, absolute. To get rid of the threat that Nibelung had built, they apparently had no choice but to tear down the entire system. And that's how we end up with the sky we have today, with just that one single dead moon hanging up there. Okay, so this timeline really puts it all into perspective. You can see the cause and effect so clearly. First, Nibelung creates the moons. Then, he weaponizes them. And then, Celestia retaliates with the Shattering, which happened about 6,000 years ago. This is the event that gives us the false sky that Scaramouche was talking about. But the question is, what happened to each of the moons individually?
All right, now pay close attention here because the fates of the three sisters were all different, and this is absolutely vital for understanding the new quest. The eternal moon, Aria, completely shattered. Its pieces just fell all over Tivat. The iridescent moon, Sonnet, was also shattered, but its legacy kind of morphed into the whole crimson moon thing tied to Kenria. But then you have the frost moon, Canon, and this is the game changer. It wasn't destroyed. Its body, its corpse, was left intact and was just exiled, thrown out beyond the false sky, and it's just been floating out there for thousands of years. So, what happened to that exiled moon for all that time? Well, that is the exact question that this new quest finally starts to answer. Because, as it turns out, that exiled corpse didn't just vanish into nothing.
And it all leads us to the new region, Nodcry. This place is ground zero for this whole revelation. It's the place where the legacy of the Frost Moon and its goddess canon has finally resurfaced.
And what's so wild is that the new mechanics in this region, the Kuvahaki energy, it's not just some abstract magic. The game is explicit. It's the literal flesh and power of a dead god. It's the physical remnants of the Frost Moon goddess canon seeping into the very land itself.
And then we get the biggest bombshell of all. The soul of that goddess, Canaan. It survived. It was reborn or reincarnated as this entity named Kutar, who's worshipped in Nodcry. And who is Kutar? She is none other than the Fatui harbinger Columbina, the damselette. Just wow. A character we've known about for years is a direct link back to this ancient cosmic tragedy.
Okay, so this is where I think a lot of people are getting tripped up. Is the game saying that the Crimson Moon from all the Canria lore is one of the original three sisters?
Yeah, that's a perfect question, because the lore is actually pretty careful here. It makes this subtle but really important distinction. The text seemed to suggest that the Crimson Moon isn't Sonnet herself. It's more like a successor power, a legacy, or an energy that was born from the shattered pieces of her iridescent moon. And that power is now tied directly to Canria's history, the Crimson Moon dynasty, and as we've learned, Arlecchino's whole lineage. So it's more like a consequence of the shattering, not the original goddess.
So naturally, when you get a lore dump this big, it's going to raise just as many questions as it answers, maybe even more. And you can tell the writers did this on purpose. They've left so many threads just dangling for us to wonder about.
I mean, for starters, where are the actual physical pieces of the iridescent moon? We still have no idea. And what about the morning star from those old fairy tales, the one they all loved? Still a complete mystery. We also don't really know why the sisters turned on each other. And of course, the biggest question of all, if the Frost Moon's soul could be reincarnated into someone like Columbina, what about the other two? What about Arya and Sonnet? Yeah, this story is definitely not over.
So, if we're going to boil it all down, what's the big takeaway here? It's that the moons of Teyvat are not just mythology anymore, they're not just celestial bodies. We now know they were artificial weapons in a cosmic war. And their destruction wasn't just some event in the distant past, it's having real, tangible, ongoing consequences that are still shaping the world we're playing in right now.
And that really leaves us with one final, kind of chilling thought to chew on. We just saw that the corpse of one exiled moon was enough to create an entire nation's culture and produce a Fatui harbinger. So the question is, what's going to happen when someone finally finds the pieces of the other two?
This has been Zereon Gaming. Thanks for watching.